Good evening. I'm Reverend Marlene Gill with the American Baptist Churches of Massachusetts. I'm the Associate Executive Minister for Church Relations. And this evening, I have the pleasure of talking with Pastor Sean McMahon of the Community Baptist Church um, in Aquina on Martha's Vineyard. Sean is the pastor there, and this congregation was constituted in 1693. It's the oldest Indigenous persons ministry in North America. Sean, I'm so glad that you could be with us today.
Thanks for having me, Marlene. Exciting to be a part of this.
Well, thank you. I'm wondering if you could say a little bit about what brought you to Aquina. I know that you and your wife have made a commitment to the church, the town, and the Wampanoag tribe. Was that something that involved over time, or was it part of what motivated you to come to Martha's Vineyard?
It didn't motivate me to come here. It evolved over time. It was my wife to be, who was my wife to be at the time, who motivated me to come here. It, she didn't make me. In fact, I was in love, and I was asking God what possible place there could be for me on the island. And somewhere in the midst of that process of discernment, I felt the calling towards the tribe. And through that, I met Reverend Dr. Leo Christian, who was the pastor at the church at the time. And he took me under his wing, and he was very helpful when I confided in him that I may or may not have been feeling a pastoral calling. And he was like, well, we'd love to have you. So he gave me lots of opportunities, and that's kind of how it evolved. I would say it was within my first month or two of moving to the vineyard that all happened, where I met Reverend Christian and became a part of the church up there and started doing music ministry and all that.
Now, music ministry, music, and spiritual formation seems to be intertwined in your work. Could you say a little bit about how they um, give each other energy?
Sure. I mean, for me, my own spiritual formation required music. I think a lot of people are always going to find, in addition to prayer, you're going to want to talk to somebody, for spiritual advice. You need to confide in someone. Other people write in a journal. And for me, it was just as important to write songs. Songs is always how I've dealt with spiritual issues, and um, I think that must be something common to people of faith, because that's what the Psalms are. That's what David's doing. He's working it out in song. And I think it's because, some people, myself included, might have trouble understanding their own feelings without being able to put it to music. I don't know why, but music is usually how I emote, and it's especially how I emote spiritually. So I would say there's that with my songwriting, and then you know in the opposite way, music can also be a force for spiritual formation. Like getting into the Baptist tradition has been so wonderful, because I've been able to learn all the spirituals and the hymns, and they're so uplifting, and they carry the spirit of Christian life and Christian witness. So, if you're feeling weak, it makes you strong. And if you're feeling sad, it can lift you up, and it helps you through all those feelings. And it's a vessel that communicates the spirit of Christian witness in all of its forms.
Hmm. Now, most pastors are bivocational these days, and I know that that's the case with you. You also have a band that you work with.
Several. My solo project is called Workman Song. So called because I'm a workman of song. The workman's worth his wages,
Mhm.
and so that's my work, right? I was always there from the beginning. It was also kind of a tip of the hat to Dorothy Day, Catholic worker, right?
Mhm.
That's my solo project. I started that when I lived in New York City in the early 2010s. and that's where I launched that project and made many amazing friends and had many amazing experiences through that. And there's also Brothers McMahon, which is with my brother Griffin, who's also a church organist, and our cousin Ted on drums. And then there's also a family band going on with my wife Katie, who releases music as Siren Mayhew, and I co-write with her and I produce her music and perform with her. There's all sorts of little outgrowths musically, but that's where we gig. We do bar band stuff, we do cover band stuff, we do all of our original music in a normal year, obviously. And here on the vineyard, we do plenty of wedding work too.
And it's getting close to that season again.
It is, and that year or this year, all that's opening up. It's great. We're starting to do some more weddings,
Now, you mentioned that your wife Katie records with the name Mayhew.
hmm
That's an important name for Martha's Vineyard.
isn't it? It's pretty amazing. So I not to overly mysticize this, but when I was discerning a call to the tribe, I didn't really realize that the tribe was on the island. It was before I really was aware of it. And when I brought this up, I said, maybe I have a calling to the tribe. What's that mean? And my brother said, well, you are dating someone whose family is deeply entwined with the tribe. And lo and behold, the church where I'm now a pastor, it was co-founded, one could say co-founded, with the help of my wife's ancestors. Thomas Mayhew Jr. was the one who learned the Wampanoag written language and taught Hayakumes, the first convert, um, English. So there's this rich exchange of language and culture. Thomas learned Wampanoag culture, tradition, religion, spirituality, and taught Christianity in those terms to Hayakomes. And the latter started the church with a few other folks from the tribe, and it was their church. It was the tribe's church. And hundreds of years later, 13 generations later, uh, a spouse of the Mayhew clan is back in this church. It's weird. It's crazy.
Now, Baptists often talk about the importance of covenant in their churches. And when I think of covenant, I think about the promises people make to each other before God, as God being the witness. In the American Baptist Church, a covenant is, in the calling of a pastor, often described as a covenant between pastor and people. There seems to be an agreement um, with you and the congregation to revitalize the church's ministry. Um, there are some promises that you and the church have made together. Could you talk a little bit about the some of those promises or goals that you and the congregation have set forth?
Well, absolutely. First of all, in the little town of Aquina, there's 350 people. So we want to see church growth, which will definitely entail, growth in numbers and growing the size of our community at the church. But because it's so small, it's also really important that we grow in maturity as well. And that's something, it's one of the things I've committed to just being present, and hanging out with the community, which is hilarious because it's a pandemic. But we're finding ways to do it and, leveraging the power of the internet and also trying to be innovative in, doing outdoor services. I've been doing lots of outdoor concerts at the church, and that's part of my deal there, basically just doing community outreach, and it's super synergistic with my music career because we live on a very musical island. People love music here. So as you can imagine, actually the pandemic was an opportunity for our church to be a lightning rod for people who wanted to see live music because we were one of the only places doing it from our porch. um, and the other thing we've committed ourselves to doing is revitalizing and renovating the parsonage property that's attached to our parcel. It's run down, it's unlivable, and it didn't need to be livable for all these years because there wasn't a resident pastor. And whether I'm the guy who gets to see it from the inside, living in it, or whether it goes to someone that I pass it on to, however long this takes, because we're doing it off of the generosity of fundraising and etc. That's one of my goals. That I want that done while I'm the pastor, and I think we can do it soon. I don't have any doubts that the community is going to rally, and I think we can get that job done. The the plans and the contractors are all lined up. It's just a matter of fundraising right now. Basically, as soon as it was legally possible, we just committed to doing drive-in services, and once that door opened, I started doing drive-in concerts, and we had this audience growing because my wife and I had been doing social distance sing live stream concerts from our living room during the whole part of the lockdown on Sunday nights. And so the first chance we had, we made that live and did that up at the church on the porch. And, it was something basically like an hour to sundown and maybe half an hour after.
Your concerts, are they the ones that are at the church? Are they primarily spiritual music? Are they a combination of things? What would one expect?
I would say is mostly secular music, and I have this kind of series that I've been doing for 2 years at the Ritz called the Holy Rock and Roll Revival, and basically that theme was incorporated into what we were doing every Sunday, which is basically you take either spiritually themed classic rock, outlaw country, or songs that could be parables for spiritual stuff, and some of it is just you got to do it because it's fun, like it's mostly secular music, to be honest, and with an occasional standout hymn sung by my wife. And if I do say so myself, sometimes the standouts were from yours truly too. But yeah,
And is there preaching incorporated, or is this primarily music only?
I would call it preachy banter. This is an outreach of a church. I'm going to be preaching a bit, and it was great. I mean, there's people like Prince, there's people like Bruce Springsteen, there's all sorts of rock and rollers who, if you see them in action, they're preaching, and Johnny Cash is a huge influence for that reason. Everything he did was a spiritual, was preaching, was a parable. So I look up to him.
Mm. Well, and we're going to have the benefit of hearing one of your songs. I understand you'll be doing No, It's Not.
Correct. Yep.
And that is from a 2014 release, Lamb.
Mm-hmm.
Um, is there anything you'd like to tell us about the song before we close out our session?
Yeah, if you like it, look it up. All of my recorded music is actually under the name Workman Song. Workman space song, like Watchman Nee. But the song is actually an old one. It's one of the first songs I wrote, to be honest, but it stayed with me forever. And I think the song was written during the beginning of my spiritual journey. And in some way, I think that is what the poetry reflects. I think you'll see by the end of the song, you know, who I was who I was becoming.
Mm. Well, and the life of faith is always becoming.
Exactly. I hope people find it inspiring because it's one of those songs a lot of people seem to really like it and find their own meaning in the poetry.
Mm. Sean, thank you for spending the time with us and giving us a window into your ministry at Community Baptist, as well as some of your thoughts and understanding of how God is leading you at this time.
It was a pleasure, Marlene. Thank you for having me and everyone at the Boston Praise TV and Radio family.